Hello to everyone. Today, together with Mikko Tolonen, we will present to you the main findings of the analysis of the bibliographical data landscape into humanities. The report is a collective effort of the DARIAH Bibliographical Data Working Group. 18 authors from 9 countries have co-written this document, which is now openly available online on Zenodo. This report is aimed at all stakeholders in the field, especially the public ones that would like to identify common interests, shape joint agendas, and reach common goals. To begin with, we needed to define what is bibliographical data, and later we used the abbreviation Bibliodata for that in our understanding, and we opted for a broad definition which says that bibliodata are structured information about the form, content, and context of documents in any form or medium. This means that all the data elements necessary for a full description of a document, including such items like controlled vocabularies or persistent identifiers, are treated as bibliodata if they are used to present information in the form of a bibliographical record. Why providing a report now? In our view, the bibliodata landscape has entered a critical phase of digital transformation that is characterized by the growing amount of data available, greater automation and data exchange capacities, and the increased ability to produce database knowledge. The influx of bibliodata reflects the growth of publishing in general and of the digital publishing of scholarly research in particular. Other contributing factors include technical advances in areas such as metadata instruction used for reference extraction, citation mining, and NI and NLP-based content descriptions applied in automated subject classification and topic modeling. A final driver here is the growing awareness among public stakeholders of the need for the open sharing of data. The automation of data processing has influenced bibliodata production and use across 3 levels. Data creation and cleaning, such as entity disambiguation, duplication, normalization. Data interlinking and enrichment, such as linking to authority records, enrichment with existing controlled vocabularies, and access to data, which is still in its early stages. However, there are promising developments at the level of search engines when fuzzier and semantically based search options are provided for users' queries. Finally, the bibliodata landscape has been affected by the boom in advanced digital research. Methods, for example, technologies, tools, and methods for advanced bibliodata research and analysis. This is tied in turn to increasing capacities to produce database knowledge, and the main technological advances now driving bibliodata-based knowledge production in the humanities relate to semantic publishing. They are exemplified by knowledge graphs, implementations, by research output aggregators, or linked data services in the national libraries sector. To better understand current bibliographical data landscape, we have constructed a map on which bibliodata stakeholders are positioned along 2 axes: production use, horizontal one, and private-public, vertical one. It needs to be noted that neither the relative size of a stakeholder bubble nor its position, center versus periphery, reflects its importance or centrality. The map shows the position of specific stakeholders vis-a-vis the 2 defined axes and the vast range of other participants in the field. And in the upcoming slides in our talk, we will discuss this map of bibliodata landscape. We are starting with outlining the main bibliodata stakeholders. And those are libraries, museums, and archives, LEM institutions, which are typically public institutions which both produce and use bibliodata. Many supplement the active processing with the reuse of machine-readable metadata. Some have active plans to migrate to automated solution for description. Research and academic libraries combine some features of this type of stakeholders with those of research infrastructures. And on the map of the bibliodata landscape, LEM institutions are represented by national libraries and bibliographical agencies and departments. The next type of a stakeholder are research infrastructures. And those are institutions, resources, and related services that are used by members of a scientific community to conduct research. Here we rely on the definitions of research infrastructures, which closely tie this category to the public sector. There may, however, be some overlaps between research infrastructures and private information services. And on the map, they are represented by institutional and public repositories such as Zenodo, CRIS systems and metadata aggregators such as OpenRE or Piana. We situate the publishing platforms used for scientific research such as Open Edition and public knowledge services on the boundaries between research infrastructures and publishers. The next important stakeholder in the bibliodata landscape are information services. Typically commercial service providers, but in some cases mixed business models apply, whose activities center on the reuse of data produced by researchers, research infrastructures on LAM. They offer targeted support to research stakeholders and LAMs, including software to manage, publish, and disseminate data and services to enrich, analyze, and reuse datasets. They provide public entities with new opportunities for research and development collaboration. However, in critical fields such as data reuse, it is hard to reconcile the different approaches to open science in the private and public sectors. And on our map, this category represented by corporations such as Scribate or Elsevier and citation indexes and academic databases. The research services of big tech companies also offer different access modes. Finally, commercial repositories appear on the map. Here, academia and ResearchGate are key examples. Publishers are the next important bibliodata stakeholder. They are either commercial or public entities and qualify both as users and producers of bibliodata. While publishers play an important role in producing their own bibliodata, they often rely on authors to supply them with information and or create recommended records with national cataloging agencies. Publishers have a wide range of data exchange systems which they use to cooperate with LAM, booksellers, research infrastructures, and information services. And on the map, this category is represented by public entities like institutional publishing houses on the one hand and commercial publishers such as Gale and Penguin on the other. Booksellers form a distinct group that is closely related to publishers, and these stakeholders generally reuse and enrich bibliodata for trade, marketing, and e-commerce purposes. Researchers and students are the next group. This category includes various researchers, scholars, and university students, as well as research groups and institutions. These entities use bibliodata mainly to discover information. However, there has also been an upswing in bibliodata research in the humanities. Current bibliodata researchers also engage in different forms of data production and reuse. Finally, individual users, general public. Typically, these individuals encounter bibliodata when browsing online or in library catalogs. Users of online bibliodata services form part of this group, but it also extends to any user who interacts with bibliographical data and is not affiliated formally with any scientific community.
Now, if we go back to the landscape graph, we may note that we see the private-public dimension here as well, and the legal status of the stakeholders. So whether entities are private or public. And we also see that the source of funding for them, that's also an important part of this, full or partial business models, whether they are commercial, non-profit foundations, and so on. And also highlighting the data policies that are at stake as well. So these are very important parts, and I will now talk for a little bit about the dynamics in this landscape. So different funding for where it comes, it creates this kind of natural division between the stakeholders. So public stakeholders responding to the needs of the main users, like researchers, was discussed already. And there are many duties that the public stakeholders have that comes from the statutory or other legal instruments. And there are many different kinds of library acts, fair policies, and so forth that are important. National data cataloging ecosystems are one thing. Bibliographical control over publications in one's country is very important for example, for the main public stakeholders here. And when it comes to the private stakeholders, they are, of course, responding to the different market needs, opportunities that are offered by the upcoming services, and they often also are functioning in between this area, in between the public and the private. So the public sector is really looking for business models that act together and respond to the needs created by the public. And we may, if we talk about commercial players like that, you have ResearchGate, Academia Edu, and metric services that are working in that domain. And even when there is this division between public and private, we really need to understand that the interdependency is a key here. So over time, universities and libraries, they've become very dependent on the private sector. For example, if you think about citation indexes, other services, service providers such as CRIS, they play a huge role also how the public sector is acting. And all the time there are different types of innovative products and services coming to the market. So we need flexibility in decision making and investments and thinking about what type of constraints there are. So long-term statutory legal obligations are here, creating tension in this interdependency also. So at the same time, if we look at it from the other way around, many of the privately owned services are really based on the commercial reuse. So data that is produced by public stakeholders as well. So privately owned academic publishers, they are depending almost entirely on the involvement of public institutions, while commercial citation indexes, they are relying on research and data that is coming really from the research community in order to develop their business models. So what is happening as a consequence is that the interdependence for relevance of public funds going to the private stakeholders and covering some of the costs and subscription fees is one of the key elements in this interdependency role that these entities have. And also there are many debates that are, of course, coming out of this with respect to the openness of Bibliodata and what solutions there might be. So then you have these other players like Open Knowledge Foundation, Open Citations, Open Research Data, and such actors who are trying to intermediate between these different types of actions that previously were very much between the public and private. And now we have the whole open science field that is kind of changing the landscape even more. So developing and maintaining different types of targeted services, whatever the approach or business model or the legal aims and so forth, that the landscape is approached is very, very important. And also then if we think about the intermediary stakeholders occupying the space between the private and public domains, as a recent development, that might be the most important one that is really changing the landscape, as was said. And there comes a need for different kinds of persistent identifiers or authority control files and so forth. And how to make these happen is a big question, and also there's a lot of space for new innovation here as well. But then if we think about these boundaries, that is what is ongoing between the public stakeholders, it is very important that we also understand that the public is not as such a unified field. So you have some research-oriented entities, universities, institutions LAM institutions that are very closely connected, but still quite different. So for the research stakeholders, the main purpose of Bibliodata services is to enable people to publish, disseminate, and evaluate research outputs. And LAM services are, of course, enabling that, but they are also doing the management side of things and the preservation of cultural heritage, and also making institutional physical holdings accessible. So these are a little bit of different types of things that we are looking at. And it's not really the technology that is at the crux of the division between private stakeholders and the public ones. There's enough resources or they may be built new types of business models that are targeting both of the research entities and the LAM institutions. And it's quite true, for example, with big companies such as ProQuest or Gale, who are changing their portfolios so that it's both research-oriented in their products, for example, discovery systems for research output, and then also some very library-centered solutions. And so there is really this research LAM divide that is quite pressing, and you, when you're operating in this field, you realize that not everything is necessarily running very smoothly. And also the private stakeholders are, of course, they're competing with each other, and at the same time they are sometimes competing with the public players, and so it's not a very easy scenario as such. So if we think about the new developments that have been ongoing, so consolidation trend, thinking about alternative business models also for the bigger players, such as EBSCO's investment in the Folio open source system is one such example. And also the kind of a very private players like ProQuest that was mentioned already, they are also looking at how to make use of those open repositories that are within the field of the public. And then all the private operators, both in research and cultural sectors, they are facing very fierce competition by the very, very big tech companies such as Microsoft and Google that are delivering services in all of the spaces that we are discussing here in the bibliographic landscape. So one way that we've been in the report thinking about the landscape is about the production and use axis that is here as well. So on the production side, you find the services where the primary mission is really the creation of bibliodata, such as national bibliographic centers, Fennica in Finland, publishers, information services, and others. And then various different academic publishers, repositories, and commercial publishers, they are all falling into this category. And there at the middle of the spectrum, we find services related to bibliodata processing and enrichment, such as Crossref, ORCID, and linking infrastructures, open abstracts, Wikidata, of course, citation indexes, metrics. And there on the very right side, we have metadata aggregation and union catalogs, Europeana, OpenAir, and so forth. So even further in that direction, there are services for the publishing of digital documents. So for example, full text repositories such as Zenodo, which is an open one, where bibliodata reuse and production are really the features offered to users, and the quantity and quality of data depends largely on those users' preferences. So then on the use side, very far right of the continuum, you've got stakeholders such as researchers and students and the individual users. And they are, of course, entities who are the target of most of the services. But these users, they are now, when the landscape is changing, they become active players also on the creation side. And that's one thing that we really underline in the report. So the Bibliodata researchers, they are not only, or they are working with the Bibliodata, which is also quite a new way of looking at the landscape changing. And at the same time, they become creators and users of the whole landscape in a very different way than before. So I would say that, or we say in the report, that this continuous reuse across services is really the key of understanding that what is ongoing and why this kind of report needs to be there to conceptually make it clearer that people can understand how the roles are changing and also to be able to situate yourself in this changing landscape. So really the public sector reuse driven by the complexity, connectivity of Bibliodata environment, and the public policy also being a key influencer here. So we can say, for example, that the FAIR principles are really, really important, open data, open science, and also evaluation of research and the principles that are conducted there that are all the time changing. They play a huge role in the way that we look at the reuse across the different services. So researchers, they can themselves provide metadata for many of the repositories and publishers and systems. And at the same time, national bibliography centers and other public bibliodata producers, they use publisher data for cataloging. So this really, the cross-fertilization that is happening is something that really needs to be underlined. And external linking of whatever metadata created anywhere. So there's really room for innovation here of seeing what kinds of services should be interacting in general. So the production at many stages is about a reconfiguration and enhancement of the bibliodata coming from many different sides. And we should maybe start thinking about the whole landscape as a collaborative effort, not only in terms of competition and thinking that what is that I can do that others cannot do, and not then share the data, when the key really is about building things together and being dynamic in a way that the services are put forward and planned, being very aware of that what was reality 10 years ago will not be the same in the future. So different stakeholders at different stages of the data production process need to be really attuned to this dynamic change that is ongoing on all the different sides. Now, so this reuse, it's not only to kind of like the emergence of more private and non-profit stakeholders, but really reconfiguring the traditional production patterns. So there are tensions, obviously, in the very traditional curatorial methods and also for the more innovative data exchange, data mining, and research-oriented approaches. At the same time, it needs to be underlined that also the very traditional curation is going to be needed. So there's been hopes that maybe all the curation will be automated, but that's not probably going to be the reality for the public curation, and also there needs to be investments also for the traditional approaches. But there are, of course, new things coming from bibliometric statistics and other data-driven research methods, and with new kinds of tools. Artificial intelligence can be a great addition to what we do, but it will not be a solution that just by pressing a button, world will be a better place. So really expanding the traditional curatorial difficult word practice. So getting beyond the basic data production and local discovery is the key. And the users, the researchers, students, those need to be engaged in they're not only users of discovery tools, they're becoming the producers. So also the aspects of bibliometrics, cultural analytics, and also book history that many of us in the group are working on, they become more important, and also that the boundaries of the borders of production and use, they are really changing. So this back and forth between different players and production and use, that is really the key for getting the converging workflows right. So we still need to say a little bit about the kind of limitations and fairly glaring inefficiencies. So many of the tensions have not disappeared by the entry of artificial intelligence and possibilities of using more efficient automation. So the tension between private commercial services and also non-profit organizations and public entities that exist hasn't disappeared. There's a limit to data access, also rigid, maybe sometimes unfounded principles of that are too idealistic, might sometimes hinder the process and progress. Also that there are inefficiencies in the replications of bibliodata production and the efforts that are put in there. Also independent production of bibliodata for the very same documents. So there's overlapping work that it just partly doing the same thing over and over again with very minor progress. That is a big problem, both on the side of private and public sphere. And also the bibliodata reuse is inefficient. So that it's not only the data quality that is hampering things, but also the lack of technological capability of the potential users is really a one thing. And sometimes also the way that things are tied up, the users are enslaved by certain graphic user interfaces, which is then hindering the creativity of what could be done. So that has been a setback for many years in both private and public side. So there are very, very strong aggregators and aggregated services that are there, but the quality of the data and maybe also thinking about how things are linked, how persistent identifiers are used. So there should be much of improvement there, but there hasn't been maybe systematic solutions to ensure that the data coming out is such that all the possible improvements with respect to, for example, the persistent identifiers have been actually added to the efficient workflows. So a lot of this is about, of course, allocation of resources, where they put and how different interoperability services are used. What is the know-how? What is the resources available, and so forth. So quite a lot of work that the solutions might already be there, but the implementation is lacking. So this kind of problems are really making things somewhat inefficient. That's one of the main points that we make in the report. And also the kind of a scope of bibliodata aggregation. So it's not always adequate for humanities research questions. So, for example, the national libraries and their bibliodata and how that has been harmonized. So there are a lot of opportunities there and possibilities of using public services like Europeana, Open Air, that aim to aggregate the bibliodata, for example, of digitized items. But for a lot of the research questions that are fairly particular about the data, it doesn't always work as such. So a lot of the bibliodata for research use, there are curators that are doing a great job, but often also research input. And sometimes a lot of it is needed to use, for example, data coming from the heritage of the printed book database or universal short title catalogs and so forth.
Yeah, the map of the bibliodata landscape and its analysis, it enabled us to identify a number of challenges and untapped opportunities that should be targeted by future bibliodata-related efforts. So we explore these challenges and opportunities across three key areas: bibliodata infrastructure, open science, and bibliodata management. The main components of bibliodata infrastructure include services and tools that support bibliodata management, including its processing, transformation, enrichment, and interpretation. The standardization of bibliodata infrastructure now increasingly takes the shape of the development of semantic publishing that would enable cross-institutional and international interoperability. This is itself a challenge, since it demands a clear set of common standardization objectives. Here, the end goal is not to adopt any single elusive format or standard, but to apply general standards such as FAIR principles more flexibly to local collections and services, while also enriching, mapping, and converting these resources to enhance interoperability. Efficient sharing of innovations in bibliodata production and use is another challenge that calls for extensive resources and expertise. These innovative solutions include the technological advances of the semantic web, artificial intelligence, machine learning. At present, innovative solutions are often seen as crowning achievements for mature collections or services. However, in many cases, there is enormous potential for their application to smaller stakeholders and less processed resources. A final challenge here concerns the identification of new areas for infrastructure investment. These choices require a good understanding of the landscape and a well-established pattern of cooperation among diverse stakeholders. This common approach is needed to identify oversights in existing resources and avoid the duplication of efforts. The next challenge and opportunity, so open science, refers to a broad set of technical and cultural issues related to access to scientific information. We identify three main challenges for stakeholders seeking adoption of the open science principles to bibliodata. First one is the widespread adoption of open science principles, which remains the greatest challenge for participants in the landscape. This is due to the persistent division of data ecosystems into open and closed ones, a division closely aligned with the one between public and private stakeholders, when private sector business models may allow for the exclusive ownership of data, tools, and services. As both the Open Citations and Open Abstracts initiatives have shown, there are many opportunities for open science initiatives in the bibliodata landscape. Those projects properly identify the limitation of access to elements of bibliodata during the ongoing reuse cycle, and they have succeeded in regaining access via advocacy, collaboration, and infrastructure building. The second challenge and opportunity is reaching out to the smaller, under-resourced stakeholders with the open science agenda, as its adoption may be limited by a sheer lack of know-how or available resources to, for example, license existing datasets. The third challenge concerns the need for a deeper understanding of open science in the context of bibliodata resources. In particular, it should be understood that open science covers not only open access to data, but also openness of the workflows, methods, and tools used in data processing. With regards to data management, data management refers to any practices involving data, including their conceptualization, storage, and dissemination. And on the stage of bibliodata creation, we identify the failure to commit to a fully fledged fully-fledged retrospective conversion of print or handwritten bibliographical publications. For example, printed enumerative bibliographies, inventories, and so on. The failure means the failure to transform them into structured machine-readable data formats. While library catalogs have been systematically digitized, for the bibliographical publications themselves, call for a more organized approach is needed. A second challenge related to the bibliodata creation concerns the organizing of knowledge about the massive volume of new online content being produced daily. Some online documents have been registered in public web archives and or by non-profit organizations such as Internet Archives. Nevertheless, the quality of the data attached to online documents remains incomparable to the standards for traditional bibliodata, such as printed books in libraries or digital research output. In the end, web bibliodata needs to be integrated with the more traditional resources. As regards bibliodata documentation, the other stage of the bibliodata management lifecycle that we pay closer attention to, the most significant challenge remains creating rich documentation that should include both the formal description and the context description and methodological background about data processing and the relationship between relevant datasets. This task needs to be addressed through close cooperation between curators and researchers. So what is next? Next, we need to go for a joint agendas for bibliodata stakeholders. As an overview of bibliodata ecosystems in the humanities, this report may serve as a conversation starter among entities, especially those in the public sector who recognize the need to take advantage of the potential of bibliodata, better allocate limited public resources, and collaborate to meet common goals. Our documents can support any bibliodata-related initiative, such as further reports, case studies, grant proposals that aim to focus on the unique issues around bibliodata, pursue advocacy and education, emphasize cooperation between diverse stakeholders, take advantage of the open science movement, or share innovations in bibliodata curation and research. And those principles, in our view, should be guiding the upcoming works in the bibliodata in the humanities landscape. Thank you for your attention, and